The Great Reset is a dystopian nightmare being played out on the world stage, and it affects us all. It's an evil, controlling, power-hungry, greedy global cabal. Stay tuned to find out more. Let's go! Hello, this is Stephanie, and this is Truth Detective. I am your very own personal truth detective, giving you the truth about the World Economic Forum, the Great Reset, the global governance, the unelected elites, the unelected bureaucrats, society, culture, and the events that affect how we live, and everything that's happening in today's world, plus a whole lot more. No topic is off limits on Truth Detective. Before we begin officially, I want to thank those first-time listeners out there. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I hope that you enjoy this episode and listen to more at truthdetectivepodcast.com. The research that I've done for this episode on Truth Detective is a starting point for your research. I will give you the links in the show notes for all the research that I did for this episode to get you started, and then you can take that adventure and question everything. That's when the real truth comes out. On the last episode, I discussed the World Economic Forum and what the World Economic Forum is all about. Well, I've known about the World Economic Forum for years, and I've known about them having a hidden agenda. Global leaders with hidden agendas are never a good thing, and I always thought they were being a little nefarious. But now, I don't have to think it anymore. I know it because it is out in the open, finally out in the air, and we can see it, we can smell it, we can taste it. It's all around us. It's everywhere we look. It's true, the World Economic Forum has its tentacles in everything that we do right now and everything that we see. Lately, it seems we are being attacked from all sides. We are losing bit by bit certain freedoms that we might lose forever. No matter what side of the political spectrum you are on, it doesn't matter. This is an American issue. It affects our constitutional republic, our rights, and whether we have them. This includes the very important First Amendment rights of freedom of speech, for example, on social media. Freedom of expression, for example, to protest for a meaningful cause. Freedom of religion, and freedom of the press, and it affects your right to defend yourself. It also protects your right to be free and be an individual with your own autonomy. For example, to do what you want and what you feel is best for yourself and your family. To be able to go where you want without being surveilled, when you want, and how you choose to live. If you choose to work, go to school, and socialize with friends. We are all so different, so that should be the least of our worries. And of course, even if you haven't been paying complete attention to what's going on, you do see inflation, gas prices going up, the war in Ukraine, the recession, the southern border being out of control, critical race theory being taught in schools, the supply chain issues, and the farmers in the Netherlands and other places being told that they cannot farm anymore. And last but not least, the vaccine mandates, bureaucrats with no real elected authority telling us we must get vaccinated no matter how many people have been sick and died. Yes, sir, it is a crazy world right now. But this all can be so easily explained. We are being led by a globalist agenda, the agenda of the World Economic Forum and the Great Reset. Globalists and the unelected elites, the unelected bureaucrats of the World Economic Forum are now in control. To become a member of the World Economic Forum, it takes a very powerful person with influence and greed and a need for control. It takes a person with an ideology of a communist or a socialist, totalitarian dictatorship. To really understand the World Economic Forum, we would have to go back decades and decades to find out what really is going on. So let's do that. We're researchers here. So let's do some research. On the propheticdaily.com website, it says here, the World Economic Forum wasn't simply the brainchild of Klaus Schwab, but was actually born out of a CIA-funded Harvard program headed by Henry Kissinger and pushed to fruition by John Kenneth Galbraith and the real Dr. Strangelove, Herman Kahn, who would lead Klaus Schwab towards their ultimate goal of complete American empire-aligned global domination. You don't have to remember all those things I just told you. I will leave every link in the show notes so that you can learn more about the World Economic Forum, about Klaus Schwab, about Henry Kissinger, his mentor. It'll all be there for you. Out of all the things that I'm going to tell you from here on in, I want you to remember those 5 words. American empire-aligned global domination. That is important to the World Economic Forum. And how do you have American empire-aligned global domination when the world has already been set up in a certain way? You break it down until it crumbles and falls and falters, until there is confusion and chaos. Then and only then can you bring in the Great Reset. There has to be a crack in the normalcy, the crack in the system, a crack in the infrastructure, a breakdown of culture and education, a breakdown of work and the economy. Everything must suffer in Western countries, including our great nation, the United States, that brings in a change as big as the World Economic Forum wants. The Great Reset is not just going to happen by chance with a snap of the fingers. But what could make a change? Let's put on our thinking caps and let's think about this in a logical, linear way. What happened in the past 2 to 3 years that has changed everybody, that has changed the world, that has somehow, maybe perhaps, given a bunch of people the golden opportunity to bring in a new way of living, a new ideology? Could it be, wait a minute, I'm getting it, wait a minute. Could it be COVID-19 coming to the world and making the world fearful and making the people fearful, telling everybody there's going to be death and destruction and to be fearful and that they have a reason to be fearful? Could it be, I don't know, that the World Economic Forum actually needed that opportunity of COVID-19 to usher in a new socialist, communist, Marxist agenda of American empire-aligned global domination? Yes! Finally, we got it. Here he is, delivering the goods, King Charles III, then Prince of Wales, on the Great Reset.
We have a golden opportunity to seize something good from this crisis. Its unprecedented shockwaves may well make people more receptive to big visions of change, and global crises like pandemics and climate change know no borders and highlight just how interdependent we are as one people sharing one planet. Over the past month or so, despite the ongoing crisis, I've been encouraged to see the growing calls for a green recovery. We need only look to the United Nations Secretary General, to the IMF, the EU, the Petersburg Climate Dialogue, the Canadian government, the COP26 Universities Network, and business leaders around the world to see this. And as we move from rescue to recovery, therefore, we have a unique but rapidly shrinking window of opportunity to learn lessons and reset ourselves on a more sustainable path. It is an opportunity we have never had before and may never have again. So we must use all the levers we have at our disposal, knowing that each and every one of us has a vital role to play. Everything I have tried to do and urge over the past 50 years has been done with our children and grandchildren in mind. So I can only encourage us all to think big and act now.
Man, we are screwed. Well, let's get into it. What is the Great Reset? Well, it started with the World Economic Forum. We do know that. And we know that King Charles III, then Prince of Wales, ushered in the Great Reset. That is his baby. If you have been paying attention, what we do know about the Great Reset is that it's no longer hidden. It's out in the open. Everybody now, it seems, is talking about it. If you listen to uncensored news outlets, internet interviews, U.S. and world news podcasts, and articles from trusted journalists, you will see alarm and concern from all over. This is a hard concept to understand. What is wrong with our way of living? We all like our autonomy, right? Having individual views, being able to go where we want and when we want, and not being told what we can and cannot do. And get this, just out recently, according to global officials, the World Health Organization now tells us about our healthcare and how it will change over the next year. So now we are being told what to do by unelected global leaders, such as Klaus Schwab, George Soros, Bill Gates, Dr. Anthony Fauci, and a whole slew of pharmaceutical companies. This is the radical agenda that Klaus Schwab had learned from Henry Kissinger back in the 1960s, when he was at Harvard. Here is a glimpse of what life will be like for us, our children, and our grandchildren if this Great Reset really takes hold. All products will become services, so no private ownership. We will rent everything. And get this, if you use too much CO2, meaning having a huge carbon footprint, you will pay back to the government for using so much CO2. U.S. dominance is over. There will be a handful of global powers running the show, and that's it. Farewell to hospital and healthcare as we know it. We are going to eat less meat and more micro-livestock. What is that? Insects. And the values that built the West will be tested and frayed. And for some reason, they don't forget to mention, by 2030, we will be ready to move humans toward Mars. I think the biggest thing to worry about is individual country sovereignty will be no more, as the Great Reset is planning on a one world order. It has already infiltrated our lives in so many insidious ways. It's hard to not believe that. It is definitely a radical agenda, and always has been. Here, on November 26th, in the Western Journal, I found this article. Klaus Schwab reveals who he really is as he introduces new role model, quote-unquote, for countries. It says here, the World Economic Forum's leader, Klaus Schwab, let the mask slip last week when he stated in an interview which nation he believes is a role model, quote-unquote, for the rest of the world. In an interview with Chinese state-affiliated media during last week's APEC CEOs Summit in Bangkok, Schwab says he sees the Chinese system as a role model for other nations. He says, I think it's a role model for many countries. The Chinese model is certainly a very attractive model for quite a number of countries. Frankly, there should be nothing appealing to Americans about living under a Chinese-style system. China is a one-party communist state with absolutely no basic freedoms whatsoever. For instance, in the past few years, the Chinese Communist Party has introduced an onerous social credit score system. We've all heard about that, which rewards citizens for what they deem as good behavior and hands out harsh punishments for even minor offenses. This system has prevented millions of Chinese people from being allowed to travel due to their own social credit scores. China has also cracked down harshly on religious and ethnic minorities in recent years. The most prominent instances come from the western province Xinjiang, which thousands of Uyghur Muslims have been arrested and sent to concentration camps. Also, let's not forget the oppression of Tibetans under Chinese rule. The article continues, this thus begs the question, why would Klaus Schwab want the rest of the world to look to a country that oppresses its own citizens and is actively trying to eliminate minorities as a role model for the rest of the world? What could this system possibly have that Schwab and the WEF admire? Unfortunately, this may have something to do with the fact that Schwab is really no different than the totalitarian tyrants he idolizes. Schwab and the WEF also want total control over society. This is also the group that wants to institute a one-world government in which nations would be abolished and a supranational body would control the lives of all people in the world. If that last sentence didn't paint Schwab and the WEF, and thus the Great Reset, as a veritable cabal of supervillains, nothing will. There is no reason why anyone should admire or want to replicate the Chinese system, and the fact that Schwab openly praises it gives a terrifying idea of what the WEF and the Great Reset may have planned. There is no doubt the Great Reset claims to make the world a better place by soft-selling what they have on their website, but that infringes on our individual rights and autonomy. Let's not forget that. And here's something that you may have heard about: the digital identification. Of course, so everybody knows that you have gotten vaccinated, and everybody knows your medical history, and if things are going correctly, and if you are paying attention to the dictates of the tyrants and how you should be living. But there's something else going on. Another soft sell made by the World Economic Forum and the Great Reset. It's for your own good, of course. It'll make life easier. Nothing to worry about at all. Here is Kim Iverson of The Hill's popular web program Rising expressing her concern.
The WEF and banks are quite literally the world's wealthiest and elite, and their track record doesn't exactly prove they have the best interest of average people in mind. Now look, digitizing certain information is without a doubt convenient. I love being able to leave my house without my purse, knowing my credit cards are stored on my phone for unexpected trips to 7-Eleven. And I'm sure there are a number of benefits from moving to digital identification that they, the ominous they, will use to sell us on. And let's start there with the ominous they. Why are they actively pushing for this concept of a digital society? Usually advancements in technology happen naturally. As more and more people adopt the new thing, the old thing becomes a relic. None of the elites have told me I must use my Apple Wallet rather than carry around my plastic cards. People either adopt the new advancement or they don't. No one is being forced into it. Some people can still carry around cash and they won't even use plastic, let alone Apple Pay. But what's odd about digital identification system is that rather than just rolling them out and letting those who want to use them, it's being advocated for by bankers and elites and pushed for by the World Economic Forum, not as a choice, but as a requirement. They're hoping governments adopt a federated digital identification system rather than private companies offering it as a convenience. And this is leaving a lot of people feeling very uneasy about the move. Of course, those who advocate for a digital identification system claim that the digital ID will solve many of these problems. If your vitals and attributes are on record, such as fingerprints or facial recognition, then the government will always know who you are and you'll never get lost in the system. They'll also always know where you are and what you buy and who you visit, and where you travel and which medicine you take and what you're allergic to. They might want to use digital identification before you can log on to the internet so they can know which websites you visit and social you post. This will all be done not only for convenience, but for safety, they'll say. And don't worry, I doubt anyone will hack your records and screw things up, like, for example, switch your medications or make it look like you visited some nefarious website that inevitably lands you on a domestic terrorist watch list. I doubt the government will use this digital identification to prevent you from entering bars and restaurants, traveling, or getting a job for not complying with a mandate the government has issued. I'm sure the government won't want to use this federated digital identification system to implement a social credit system where the goodies in society get more than the baddies. Don't worry, these are all conspiracy theories. And we all know the conspiracy theorists have been completely wrong about absolutely everything during this pandemic. See, you have nothing to worry about. Let the banks make a system we all have to adhere to that follows the guidance of the World Economic Forum's Great Reset agenda that will be monitored by the government. Nothing to worry about.
And just to be sure that you understand, Kim Iverson of Rising, the clip you just heard, is no longer with that program because she was axed from an interview where she would have had the opportunity to ask Dr. Anthony Fauci some hardball questions. Deemed a conspiracy theorist, she and Rising went their separate ways, proving once again the mainstream media is complicit in the Great Reset. But after the pandemic is kind of slowing down. What is the World Economic Forum and the Great Reset's next move to usher in fear and take control? Mainstream media is not done yet pushing for the Great Reset. Here is an undercover video of CNN editor Charlie Chester, made by Project Veritas. Listen here.
We're going to start focusing mainly on climate, like global warming, and like that's going to be our next, like it's going to be our focus. Like so, our next thing is going to be for climate change awareness.
So that's like the next
pandemic, like story, like that will beat to death. But that one's got longevity. They'll probably be able to milk that for quite a bit.
Did Charlie Chester actually say milk that for quite a bit? After the COVID-19, there's always something that the World Economic Forum and the Great Reset uses for alarmism, and this happens to be a perfect time to move into the climate change, my hair's on fire, urgency. And this, wouldn't you expect during a hurricane or right before a hurricane for the President of the United States to say to you to evacuate your home, to put wood over your windows, to take care of the animals and make sure that they're not left in the house or that they are in proper shelters, to pay attention to the search and rescue people? No, he doesn't say that. But instead, he says, get a vaccine. Listen here. It's unbelievable.
A vital part of preparing for hurricane season is to get vaccinated now. Everything is more complicated if you're not vaccinated and a hurricane or a natural disaster hits.
Now, of course, this is debated over what he meant and what he said, but there's no mistaking. It was his words. President Joe Biden is a little confused with the timeline. It's a pandemic, and then it's the climate change, not both. And here is another example of President Joe Biden saying something that perhaps he's confused about during the recent Hurricane Ian.
And I think the one thing this has finally ended is a discussion about whether or not there's climate change and we should do something about it.
But doesn't Joe know that many of the edicts in the climate change emergency can be proven false by many scientists? Since he's talking about hurricanes, how about this one? There has been no increase in frequency of hurricanes from recent data. Or this one. For human advancement, warmer temperatures are better than colder temperatures. Well, how about this? Cold kills far more people than heat does. And this? The best solution is more CO2, not less. With a lower CO2 count or net zero, we kill life here on Earth. CO2 is plant food. Plants need it, animals need it, and humans need it to live. We will feed more of the population by having more CO2. Did you know the polar bear population has grown in the last 50 years, not decreased, as climate alarmists will have you think? Polar bears are thriving where sea ice is diminishing, and the number of tornadoes is decreasing. If you want to know more climate change truths, you will look for the book Inconvenient Facts, the Science That Al Gore Does Not Want You to Know by Gregory Wrightstone. I will have the link in the show notes. And in case you have any doubt about anything that I have told you in this episode about the World Economic Forum and the Great Reset, you can pick up Klaus Schwab's and Thierry Malloret's book called COVID-19, The Great Reset, and how they want to usher in a different way of life, a communist socialist ideology that leaves the middle class nowhere to go but down. Hey, you know what? I am not at all finished with the World Economic Forum and the Great Reset and the global governance and the unelected bureaucrats and unelected elites. Keep listening to the episodes that are going to come and learn more about this topic that affects every single one of us. If you enjoyed this episode, go to truthdetectivepodcast.com to listen to my past episodes. There is something that will resonate with you for sure. And you may email me at truthdetectivepodcast@gmail.com to give me feedback on any of the episodes that you've listened to and give me a possible topic that you would like for me to research. I do this podcast for you, and I want to make sure I'm giving you great content that you love. And I am proud to say that I have been publishing videos and will do so on a regular basis now on YouTube, Truth Detective with Stephanie Lee. Starting this week, videos will come out Tuesdays and Fridays. These videos will be more in-depth, where I can show you websites and articles and have a conversation about the topics that we talk about. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you next time on Truth Detective. Okay, bye-bye.